p.m. and I will call the February 25th, 2021 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Commissioner Martinez, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez.
You're welcome.
All right, I'd also like to welcome City Manager Hubert Martinez. I see he's on tonight, so welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, we're on item number 3, approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Mr. Chair, yes, we do have a couple recommended changes. The first change would, well, I guess the reason for the changes is we would like to, and when we get to the matters from staff, to bring our attorney Randy Audio into the call. And so to kind of smooth out the process, my recommendation would be that we move all the administrative items to the front of the meeting. So taking the old business to follow the items table from prior meetings, and then have that followed by matters from staff. So we can get through our administrative items, have that discussion with Randy, turn him loose, and then go into our priorities discussion as the bulk of the meeting at the end.
Okay, thank you, Director Hubert. So did everybody understand that? He's requesting that we move old business up ahead as item number 5, and then items tabled from prior meetings as item number 6. And then items from staff will be item number 7. And then items for consideration, the 2021 priorities discussion will be item number 8. Are there any other changes from the commission, or is there a motion to approve as amended? Commissioner Martinez, any other changes?
No, sir.
Commissioner Casalos? Nope, you're muted, Commissioner Casalos.
No, sir.
Commissioner Wright?
So we're moving February 11th items to be the very first thing?
Yes, right after after item number 4. So old business will be item number 5. Items tabled will be item number 6. Matters from staff, which will include a discussion from the city attorney as item number 7. And then item number 8 will be items for consideration. And then item 9 will be matters from the commission, and then item 10 is adjournment.
That's fine with me, Mr. Chair. Do you need a motion?
Unless there's any other changes, Commissioner Quintana, is there?
No changes.
And Vice Chair Vihil, any changes?
No, Mr. Chair, no changes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So, okay, I'm ready for motion.
So, Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda as per your amendment.
There's a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
All right, we got a motion and a second from Vice Chair Rehid. Any further discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none. Roll call, Director.
Commissioner Don Casados,
Yes.
Commissioner Nisa Martinez,
In favor of the motion.
Chair Eric Martinez,
In favor?
Commissioner Dinah Quintana,
In favor?
Vice Chair Clyde V. Hill,
In favor of the motion?
Commissioner Earl Wright,
In favor of the motion.
and then Commissioner Sadia Ahmed, who is not present tonight. We should do a roll call or
Oh,
as
I
well. But the motion passes.
skipped that one, sorry.
I missed the second though. Who seconded the minutes or the
Clyde.
agenda? Okay. All right, motion passes 6-0. Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, I'd like to do a roll call to determine a quorum.
Thank you, Director. I failed to acknowledge there is a quorum and that Commissioner Ahmed is not in attendance with us tonight, so apologize for that. All right, we're on item number 4, public concerns, business from visitors. I don't see anybody online. Nobody is in the chambers. Can you confirm about any folks online?
There's not anybody online. We're checking the door right now. There's not anybody in the chambers. And nobody had contacted us to participate in advance of the meeting either.
Okay. Who's? Uh-huh.
Oh. No,
That was
that's-
Nico. Because
All
I'm
right.
over here busy on,
Is that you, Commissioner Casados? You might want to go ahead and mute yourself. You give us one quick second. We're trying to get Commissioner Quintana set here.
Eric, there's some folks here for another meeting that's being hosted next door. I'm gonna go let them in, but there's no one here for this.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have anybody here attending from the public or any business from visitors, so we will move on to item number 5, old business. We got the February 11th, 2021 approval of the minutes. Commissioner Wright, do you have any comments about the February 11th?
Mr. Chair, just one thing. It's nice to have the audio recordings to go through these with. Those haven't been posted yet. I have found a few little typos in there. Yeah, I prefer to have the audio minutes available to review these. But if there's no other changes, then I'm comfortable getting them approved tonight, but I would just prefer that we have that opportunity.
Okay. We'll note that.
So did we want to, I'm sorry, I was helping Commissioner Quintana get on. Did we want to go through those minutes with correction?
Commissioner Wright noted just some misspellings and just wanted the audio available to be able to go through the minutes. The audio, I guess he said wasn't posted yet.
Yeah, it's not. Sorry, this is a 2-week turnaround is tough for us.
Yeah.
So did we still want to go through the minutes or do we want to table them to another date?
It sounded like Commissioner Wright, you were okay with proceeding.
It's up to the commission.
I'll ask if, just raise your hand if you have any amendments to the minutes for February 11th, commissioners. Okay, I'm not seeing none. So do we have a motion to approve? If you need some more time to go through them, that's fine too.
Mr. Chair, just for expediency, I would move to table these. I mean, there's some typos, but there may be some other things. So I would make a motion to table.
Okay, there's a motion to table the minutes. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Roll call, Director.
Commissioner Don Casados,
In favor.
Commissioner Anissa Martinez,
In favor.
Chair Eric Martinez,
In favor.
Commissioner Dinah Quintana,
Abstain as I was absent for that meeting.
Vice Chair Clyde V. Hill,
In favor of the motion.
and Commissioner Earl Wright.
In favor.
Motion passes 5-0 with one abstention.
All right, we also have a final decision for case number 2021-01. I believe that was the one I recused myself, right?
2021-01 is the Del Norte.
Okay,
Yeah, that was from last meeting.
thank you, Director. This item is the written decision, the final decision for case 2021-01, commercial site plan for Del Norte Credit Union. Quick question, Director, on item number 7 on the conditions. Didn't we also specify to that condition that be coordinated with staff as well, or I don't know if we were that specific, but
We were not during the making of the motion.
yeah, okay.
Sorry, I had my mic off. The question was about number 7, if there was discussion about coordinating with staff and the attorneys, and there was during the discussion phase, but during the making of the motion, this was exact language.
All right, is there a motion on this item, commissioners? Going once, going twice.
Motion to approve?
All right, we have a motion to approve the final decision of case 2021-01. We have a second.
Second, Mr. Chair.
We got a second. Is there any discussion? There is, you can raise your hand. I can see you guys, you all on one screen, so. Okay, we've got a question from Commissioner Quintana.
Okay, the findings and facts incorporate both the January 14th meeting and the February 11th meeting. I am turning to you to see what is the appropriate thing for me since I was absent for the second of the two meetings. Do I also abstain from the approval of these findings of fact?
So the decision to approve was made at the meeting that you were absent from.
Okay,
So I would say that kind of in keeping with past practice, that it would be okay for you to abstain on this one since you were
Okay.
not present. Any other discussion? Oh, Commissioner Wright has been dropped. Hey, Commissioner Wright, if you can hear us, we're working on it.
Okay, I'm back audio.
All right,
Can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I think it dropped on my end. Was there ever a motion
There's
on
a
the
motion-
findings?
There's a motion to approve and a second. We're in discussion.
There's like a couple of typos I'd like corrected.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Finding number 1, City of Espanola Public Works Department. Department should be capitalized. Finding number 10, very end of the sentence, north N. Riverside Drive. Sorry, it's my addressing stuff coming out.
Okay.
And I guess I am concerned, Mr. Chair, under the findings, that essentially I'm a little concerned that the public statements from the January 11th meeting are not reflected in the findings. They are in number 7. But there's no mention of the concerns that were raised during a public hearing, during a quasi-judicial proceeding at the January 14th meeting. And again, Mr. Chair, this was a case where we had a lot of public feedback. I think it's important the findings reflect, at least in summary, what those were. So besides the typos, and I don't really have an amendment at this point.
Mr. Chair. Finding number 5 was written to summarize, instead of providing another list that might have been confusing, to summarize the list of to-do items from the January 14th meeting.
I would say that from
I
recollection.
and I understand that. However, it doesn't reflect that the concerns came from both the commissioners and the public, and which concerns were attributed to which. And in this case, it applies to actual parties in the case. That's my concern here. So I'll just leave that as it is, Mr. Chair, but I can't support these findings without a better clarification of that, of what occurred on the public hearing on January 14th.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. There's a couple of minor typos. I'm not sure if that would require necessarily an amendment to the motion. And since there's a motion on the floor, I think we need to act upon it. Is that correct, Commissioner Wright? I'll lean on you as parliamentarian.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's correct. I missed all that, but that's fine. You had a quorum. If there was a motion and a second, that question needs to be called.
Okay, any other discussion? Commissioners? All right, let's call the question, Director.
Commissioner Don Casados,
Favor.
Commissioner Nisa Martinez,
In favor.
Chair Eric Martinez,
In favor.
Commissioner Dinah Quintana,
Abstain due to absence?
Commissioner Vice Chair Clyde B. Hill,
In favor of the motion?
and Commissioner Earl Wright.
Opposed to the motion to approve the findings as written.
All right, so the motion passes 4-1 with one abstention.
Thank you, Director. All right, we'll move on to item number 6, items tabled from prior meetings. September 10th, 2020 meeting, final decision for case 2020-11. I believe that's the one that I recused, so I will not be voting on that one. We do need particular commissioners on that for purposes of a quorum. And I think we have
got 'em.
those that were present at that meeting for a quorum vote. So correct.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we tracked from the September 10th meeting that voting parties would be Commissioners Casados, Anissa Martinez, Vice Chair Clyde B. Hill, and Commissioner Dinah Quintana.
Thank you, Director. All right, do we have a motion on this final decision? Commissioners?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
All right, we've got a motion. We have a second.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this final decision? All right, seeing none and hearing none, let's take the roll.
Commissioner Don Casados,
Favor.
Commissioner Anissa Martinez,
In favor.
Vice Chair Clyde V. Hill,
In favor?
Commissioner Dinah Quintana,
In favor?
and then that leaves Chair Eric Martinez
I'm recused.
and Commissioner Earl Wright.
I have to abstain.
All right, so motion passes 4-0 with 2 abstentions.
Thank you. All right, we have the next item, January 14th, 2021 meeting, approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Wright?
I do appreciate some of the corrections that were made However, I still feel there's a couple of areas I'd like to clarify, and I can walk through those.
Okay, you got the floor.
So again, on page 3, and this is the section in the middle of the page, Commissioner Wright noted the name of Camino Miramontes was misspelled on the recently city approved plat. So I'd like to insert recently city approved.
Page 3.
And then finishing that sentence, noting the importance of such details on plats of legal record.
Recently city approved. Okay.
Can I get the end of that sentence one more time, please?
On plats of record.
On plats of legal record. So the entire sentence should read, Commissioner Wright noted the name of Calle Miramontes was misspelled on the recently city approved plat, noting the importance of such details on plats of legal record. Yes, and again, in the following sentence, Director Hubert verified that NCRTD was, and at this point, insert sent DRT materials in August. And was, and then continue the sentence, given the opportunity to comment on the development, da 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 da.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any others?
I do have more. There's quite a few, Commissioner, Mr. Chair. So at the end of that sentence that ends bus stop or landscape plan, the discussion at the meeting in regards to the bus stop, as actually I made a statement, so I would add, Commissioner Wright noted that for the benefit of the city and its residents, and to meet the goals of the comprehensive plan, more street trees should be considered, especially adjacent to the bus stop.
Got that. Okay, Commissioner. Continue.
And then at the end of the paragraph, that he concluded by discussing vehicle stacking issues. And I would like to add this, and raising concern regarding inadequate vehicle stacking capacity for the drive-in lanes and the subsequent negative impact on public safety. Good. Again, I do appreciate the next Commissioner Wright statement that where it questioned the lack of utility approvals with an S. I do appreciate you adding that because that was the comment. So if you could add an S to utility approvals, appreciate that. Proceeding on to page 4. My concern with this is specific questions were asked of the applicant, and what was missing was the applicant's responses. And it's a little out of time sequence perhaps, but just to add 2 sentences to the end. Which was applicant was amenable to looking at street trees along North Riverside, period.
Apologies, which paragraph are we on page 4?
This would be the 4th paragraph on the draft that we received in this packet. So it starts, Commissioner Wright noted the applicant's willingness. Have you found the paragraph?
Yep, and then you wanted to add a sentence on the end?
2 sentences.
Okay.
First one was applicant was amenable to looking at street trees along North Riverside. And second sentence would be applicant also agreed to comply to sign regulations without exceptions or variance. Did we get those? Okay, page 6. Roman numeral 6. Old business, and again, this is the paragraph, Commissioner Wright abstained as he was not present at the meeting due to family death and noted his objection to being shown as absent rather than excused. And again, I realize we're paraphrasing these minutes. I went through the audio. That's not exactly what I said, but this issue has been raised before. And that was the intent of my comment. So just full disclosure on that amendment. Page 7. This final decision for case 2020-02. Commissioner Wright requested striking finding number 5. I would like to insert the phrase in its entirety. As hearsay. And finally, last paragraph, page 8, or first paragraph, page 8. If we just insert delayed in front of administrative items.
Okay, can you say
And
that?
with that, Mr. Chair, if there's no other edits that others found, I would make a motion to approve those minutes with those amendments.
Thank you, Commissioner. Add the word delayed before administrative items. I'm just clarifying to Director Hubert, the last one.
That's fine.
All right, there's a motion to approve with amendments as noted by Commissioner Wright. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Quintana. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing and hearing none. I'll go ahead and take the roll, Director.
Commissioner Don Casados,
Abstain.
Commissioner Anissa Martinez,
In favor.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Chair Eric Martinez,
In favor.
Commissioner Dinah Quintana,
In favor with the changes?
Vice Chair Clydie Hill,
In favor with the amendments.
and Commissioner Earl Wright.
In favor with amendments.
All right, so motion passes 5-0 with one abstention.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. We're on to item number 7, matters from staff. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would like to introduce the attorney, Mr. Randy Audio, has joined the call with us this evening. He is the department attorney for the Planning and Land Use Department on contract with the City of Espanola. And we wanted to take this opportunity as part of our ongoing process of improvement to have a very brief discussion around kind of the findings and the final decisions in general. As was indicated earlier this evening and in previous meetings, we agree with the commission that we could approve these. We discussed some ideas with Randy, and we wanted to utilize kind of as an example a case that's very, or the types of cases that might be very clear, one with variances, where we have specific criteria that need to be met that we review in the meeting and discuss those points, and then, work to update both our findings, and then also you'll see at the next meeting, the staff reports and the way in which we present some of this material. So some of these things that we have been tracking on the final decisions will in the future be tracked on the staff reports, things about like the notice, for instance, and some of the process things. And we'll make our final decision document a little bit more around the discussion that happens during the meeting. So I'm going to pull up on the screen the 4 criteria, and these were also emailed out to the commission earlier for your reference. They're also in your manuals, and so then that way we can utilize this and then kind of talk about the way in which we can think about as a commission during the meeting the kinds of things that we're paying attention to and the questions we're asking and the criteria that we're evaluating, because those will feed directly into the actual findings that we have in that final decision document. So I've got.
So the example you're pulling up, Director, is having to do with variance.
Yeah, this is not for a particular case. This is just a kind of hypothetical scenario. But it's one whereby, if we were listening to and hearing a public hearing on a variance case and then writing findings for that variance case, and then these are the kind of review criteria, the idea being, of course, that the job of the commission during the public hearing is to evaluate whether or not a proposal has met the review criteria, whatever they might be. And so, again, because these are relatively straightforward, pretty explicit, we're using this as an example for this exercise. All right, so I've got now those up on the screen, and at this point I'll turn it over to Mr. Audio.
Thank you, Mr. Audio. Welcome to the meeting. We appreciate you being here. So thank you for attending.
Well, thank you all, commissioners, and Richard and Allison. I think as we've discussed this, I've been helping Espanola now for a while. And what it is you folks have a difficult job in every case that you're doing. You're balancing, as you know, the property interests and the rights of the parties involved. And what is a helpful strategy to do this is, as Richard mentioned, is to focus yourselves, and through the staff report, the staff can help focus you on those things that are actually legally required to be met to grant the request. So you get all kinds of testimony during a hearing from folks, especially if it's a controversial request. There may be a proposal that is very controversial in the community, but there's an absolute legal right to it. So you may hear again and again oh, this is going to be horrible for the community and it's going to cause all kinds of problems and such. But if at the end of the day, legally, that landowner they've met the requirements, there many times isn't a way to deny that request. So what I'm proposing, along with Richard and Allison, we're all on the same page on it, is to start this process, and in next month's meeting, start to incorporate the process that I'm going to outline for you tonight. And it will start with the staff report and end with the proposed findings and conclusions. And so here's how it will work, kind of with a reorganization of the presentations by staff and then your findings and conclusions. Essentially, the first part of a staff report will be the procedural part and describing for you how this case has gotten here, what the application was, when it was submitted, were notices posted, and all those things required by your ordinance that are process driven. And there will be a determination from your planning staff as to whether the legal requirements for submitting this application were met. So that will be first. You'll have that process section. Then second will be a presentation about what the standards are that you're going to be applying to that case. And as we all know, in a variance, there are strict criteria that have to be met before a variance can be granted. And if they are met, then they are entitled to that approval if all of those tests, the 4 parts of the tests, are met. So the staff will then guide you with the stating those criteria in the staff report, and then you may elicit evidence during the hearing if the parties are not following that. For example, many times you'll have a neighborhood opponent. Someone, let's say, wants to build a garage closer to the adjoining lot than the setback requirements would allow. And the reason he wants to do it is because he has a triangular shaped lot that does not allow him to meet setback requirements and have enough room to put a garage in. If all the other houses in the neighborhood have garages, and it is truly significant in this neighborhood for someone to have a garage, then it may be that this applicant might meet the legal requirements. And if a neighbor is simply saying, well, he's proposing it and I think it's going to be ugly, and I don't want that on that property because I don't want to look at that ugly garage all the time. Well, you could then ask a question of that opponent. Well, are all the other lots in the neighborhood rectangular in shape, and do they allow enough room for a garage? Is his lot different? Does your house have a garage? Things like that, where you would circle them back to the tests themselves. And then in doing so, you're focusing on yourselves on what to look for in the record. And obviously, it's still the applicant's obligation to present facts and evidence, either in exhibits or testimony, that would meet these criteria. Staff won't be doing that for them, and you will not be doing it either. It's the burden's on the applicant to show that they meet the criteria. But if staff at the very beginning, when the person comes in for this, goes through the criteria with them, they're on notice of what they have to do. So that during that staff report and then during the hearing, you will have a more targeted view of what evidence has to be presented to you in order to consider whether to grant the variance. When you're looking at this criteria, obviously the most difficult thing about granting a variance is that there has to be a showing that there is a physical difference with this property and other properties in order to get the variance. Many times that is the hardest thing to show for folks, and they simply want to get that garage too close to the boundary line, but their lot may not be topographically, physically unique. So, and in a way, then, if the house was built too close to the property line on the side that the person wants to put their garage on, that would be a situation where that hardship may be self-imposed. And then what you're really having to look at is that practical difficulty or hardship of the location of the garage caused by the interpretation of the code in this specific way. In other words, does the unique shape of the lot affect the placement of the garage? And then is this something that's generally, is this self-imposed? Is it self-imposed? And if not, then is it, do other houses in the neighborhood have what's being requested because they have normal sized lots or normal shaped lots? And then the next showing would be, you'd have to show that this would preserve or increase the enjoyment or a substantial property right of the applicant, which is possessed by other owners in the vicinity. So that's an independent finding. You have to prove all four. And then fourth, you're gonna have to show that it is not injurious to the neighbors. So it cannot be a variance that would cause, for example, no fire access, no emergency access between two buildings. So you have to show that you're not going to meet going to create a dangerous situation like that. So at the hearing, you would look for all of that testimony. And obviously, like Richard said, we're picking a very easy one in this example. It gets much more complicated in site plan reviews and conditional uses and things because there's more subjectivity to it. Variances are very strict provisions of the code, and you have to meet certain criteria very specifically. So then what will happen is the board will listen to all of this, and as it renders its decision, for the planning department, then the staffer, director, whoever's doing it will then look at the evidence in the hearing with these things in mind. And what is the best organization for findings and conclusions in a decision is you first lay out that the procedural criteria were met under process. Then you, or not, if there's a fault in the process, then that may need to be reheard, or they may not get what they have asked for. And then you set out your findings, and the findings are facts related to the criteria in that variance section. So what the findings would be is finding A, requirement number 1 of the variance review criteria has been met in this case because the owner's lot is in shape and size different than every other lot in the neighborhood. It's of a triangular shape, and there is not enough room on the lot to meet the setback requirements and have a garage. So you'd set out your findings in that way based upon the evidence presented. So you there would say the applicant introduced evidence of a survey of the house showing the size and the shape and the lot. He showed the other lots in the neighborhood were of a larger size, and that the physical room on his lot was not available to put a garage in and meet setbacks. So all of those things will be in the findings. And then when you've done that for each of those four to see if they've been met or not in the findings with the facts presented at the hearing, you then in your conclusions, legal conclusions would state of the variance review criteria were met by the facts that are exhibited in the findings of fact because, and then you'd list the four requirements and each of those were being met. The variance, the request for a variance shall be granted. So in that way, as I said, you can help the parties focus on what needs to be shown. You help yourselves by realizing if someone is off base in their testimony, and while it may be very moving, it may have nothing to do with the case at all. And for example, if you're working on a business site plan approval and the community's upset because they don't think that this is the right location for this particular type of business. Let's say it's I've seen cases recently where Family Dollars may meet some neighborhood opposition because it is seen as a business that's designed for needy folks or people of a lower economic status, and some people don't want that in their neighborhood. Other people are thrilled to have it, but just because the store is a Family Dollar, it wouldn't make any difference if it was a Whole Foods market or not, if it meets the criteria for approving a store selling goods and food at that location. If that meets your code and the zoning of that spot, then it doesn't really matter what the name on the store is. But you may have, the record may be full of testimony that it is inappropriate to consider that because it shouldn't be there because of this type of store that it is. So I'm not going to go on at length on this. You'll see it in practice in the upcoming meetings, but I will be working with staff to help focus them, the parties, and yourselves on the specific criteria of each of the cases that come before you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Audio. Appreciate that. Your time and your explanation. I'll lead off some questions, and then I'll ask some of the commissioners if they have any other questions of their own. One that seems to come up at times is the interpretation about, and I think we have this listed in a lot of criteria for different types of development, including this one on variances, is the general health, safety, and welfare, and which is a very broad thing. And so folks tend to say, well, this type of development is going to increase a lot of traffic, and that's going to be a safety issue because of the amount of traffic. A particular business, if it's say a paint shop and they have an exhaust fan that exhausts fumes from painting vehicles, that sort of thing, which can sometimes be subjective. How would you suggest that the commission consider those sorts of things?
Well, you didn't start off with the easy question, did you? You
answered all those easy ones.
Yeah, there's a reason we did the variance, because it's supposed to be easy. But you hit on an excellent point. And the biggest thing that I can say about that, just in general, is you would look for evidence that this particular use would damage the health, safety, or welfare of the community in a way that other legal uses would not. If it's a legal use, and if your environmental rules of the community or the state approve of this use with the precautions taken that are presented by the business, then you cannot find that it's going to be harmful to the general health, safety, or welfare, because it would not be any more harmful than any other business that could locate there. For example, if you've got a gas station 100 feet down the street sitting there, and this business is coming in for a paint shop, and they're worried about those fumes and issues like that, well, you know, you look to the gas station down the street, and it really isn't fair to that business to say, well, this looks to us, in our opinion, that this could be damaging, when the gas station met all the requirements of the environmental requirements, and so does the paint shop. So you do not have the authority to deny an application based upon that criteria if they meet those requirements. It's just like the analysis that happens with a liquor store. If they've met the distance requirements for establishing a store, they've got their state licensing, and they've met your zoning, then even if, in your opinion, there doesn't need to be more liquor sales at that location, it might harm the community, that isn't a legal basis for denying it, because that is outside of your authority. So that's, you first look to see what is within your authority that could be used as a reason to deny this based upon somebody's request. And if they've met all of the legally set out criteria of that type of a business in the state, then it is not something that you can regulate. Traffic is a great example. And so if you've got something, and you know, classic case comes up, I know you've got, is your main street that comes through town a state highway?
Yes.
Well, that causes all kinds of problems because the state highway department decides what is going to be allowed and what isn't. So you, as a community, have very little flexibility with that. And if they sign off to say that this proposed number of trips per day at this location is not going to create a traffic hazard, then it's very hard to refute that. So that would be something then that is unless there's direct evidence in the record that would support a finding. Otherwise, like the opponents hiring a traffic engineer or some evidence like that, then you're not going to be able to deny it on that basis.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation. I think that helps a lot, especially just for me.
Yeah.
I think Director Hubert has a follow-up to that.
Hey, Randy, it's Allison. So sometimes what we see is that, you know, the acknowledgement of, yes, maybe the health, safety, and welfare, you know, concerns, you know, are there, but that we don't have, as you said, kind of a legal reason to deny the project. And so what I've seen over the years is that some conditions of approval, sometimes onerous, sometimes reasonable, kind of get heaped on as a, like, yes, you know we have to say yes to this, but we're, you know, going to ask you to do these things as
So,
part of our approval process.
Mitigation measures.
Right. So, but there's a very wide kind of spectrum of conditions of approval. And I'm always curious if there's kind of a limit of like how much is too much that we could legally ask them to do as kind of a mitigation measure and in order to gain our approval.
Well, that's another real good question, and I appreciate it. And the best short answer is if and again, if you're looking at a site plan approval and that business is legal in that zone, and you can approve it under your zoning code, but there are, let's say it is a very high traffic area. Well, if you place conditions on that surrounding traffic flow on the lot and control what you can with access to the lot to make that better, you can certainly do those things. What I would say is you cannot do anything that's simply arbitrary and capricious. If a perfect example would be if you've got a tire shop there and they're planning on doing a decent amount of their work outside, well, it's not unreasonable to put some sound buffering, fencing, and landscaping in between the residential area behind them and the business. That is a perfectly appropriate requirement because it will lessen the impact on the neighborhood. What you can't do is something that will cause them to not be able to build on their property, or it would be so onerous and so expensive for them that it would prevent them from going forward with the project. That would be found by a court to be arbitrary and capricious and beyond your authority. So you always look for the relationship to the problem, and if it is reasonably fixed, that would be my best overall advice.
So just to make certain also that we don't, if we do have specifics, it sounds like you're saying if we do have particular specifics that are the requirement, that we do not ask them for more than that. For instance, if we have a landscape requirement of a certain square footage, that we don't make this particular development double that square footage or those kinds of things.
Right, that would be arbitrary because your code already establishes the standard. And just because you'd really like to see that lot look pretty, court's not going to think much of that rationale.
Okay, thank you.
Same with things like additional ADA spaces or things of that
Sure.
sort.
Sure. And you know, I mean, there can be exceptions to that. Let's say it is a pharmacy and it's located on the blue bus route, and there may need to be some accommodations made that would help pedestrian access to that property. You know, that even if your code doesn't specifically require it, may be something that is reasonable under the circumstances, because there's an obvious problem that you would see if the person gets off the blue bus and there's not a good way for them to access the business.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Audio. And thank you, Allison. That followed up the next question I was going to have, so you already asked it for me.
So I have a question on that point, Mr. Chair.
Hold on, Mr. Commissioner Wright. I'm going to go around the commission right now and
But on that point,
Commissioner, please.
okay, I'll come back to it, but it was on point here.
Commissioner Quintana, do you have any questions for Mr. Audio?
Hello, Mr. Audio. This is Commissioner Quintana. And this sort of goes off a little bit, but it's a question I've always had. On occasion, we'll come across a case where we don't have an exact code to best meet this application. So we have been known to try to create something that is most similar or something that'll work. How does that affect the overall legality of the use of that property under those situations?
Well, it's a classic. It happens all the time for many different reasons. I'll use an example that happened in the city of Albuquerque while I was a assistant city attorney doing land use there. And it was a jet-powered helicopter that was landing at a TV station. And it was directly across the street from residential property. Well, our code didn't handle the landing sites for helicopters. So zoning had allowed them under certain circumstances previously. We found in that case that we needed to change our code. So that's one way to solve it, is if you have that example come forward. Obviously what you do is another example in Albuquerque was bumper boats and go-karts weren't specifically called out as a conditional use. An amusement facility wanted to put them in. And so the scenario, how it works is, first thing that happens in this case would be Richard would rule that that is a similar use, that is an outside use, like other uses that are allowed in that commercial zone. Therefore, I believe it's an allowed conditional use. That would be his his interpretation, then the Planning and Zoning Commission can either accept that interpretation or reject it if on the grounds if you don't agree with his analysis. And then obviously the final authority is the governing body and the council that is the zoning authority. So the way you handle them is by determining whether or not they're similar to uses allowed in that zone and not a whole lot more intense. A really hard one is one that has come up recently for me with another village. And what it was is they have just one general commercial area and they allow woodworking. Well, the woodworking that had been previously approved had all been in interior warehouses, you know, so the woodworking was done in a controlled environment. Well, an application came in that included the sawing of logs in a covered structure, but it was open air. So that had to go through that process. So that is how it's done. You decide whether it's similar and or it's more, it may be just way too intense for that zone. And then you would say it's not doable in that zone. And then the person might challenge that decision. And then you might have to decide whether the person is correct that the decision of the planning director was wrong and that it should be allowed in the zone. So because there's never a code that includes all potential uses. We now are going to have electric charging stations. Potentially we're going to have hydrogen charging stations. So, you know, for vehicles, and those things just, our codes don't cover them. Well, where are gas stations allowed? So that's how you would do it.
Commissioner Quintana, any others?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Aguirre. I may have some other questions in a little bit.
All right. And we'll go
Thank you.
around the room a second time in case you have follow-up. So Commissioner Martinez, do you have any questions for Mr. Audio?
No, I just wanted to thank Attorney Audio for sharing all his information with us. It's very useful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad to help.
All right. Commissioner Casados, do you have any questions for Mr. Audio?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Casados. Commissioner Wright?
Yes, Mr. Chair. And again, these questions are in the chat. But on the point, when we were talking about requirements, I'll go to that one first. And we often get in this situation where the code is either silent or conflicting on requirements. How do we go about handling that? And again, and I want to echo, before you answer that, echo Commissioner Anissa Martinez's comments. Great to have you here. We get stuck out on a limb sometimes trying to interpret legal issues, and we're basically on our own. So it's great to have you here. Thanks.
Well, happy to be here. And in answering your question, we live in New Mexico, and I'm a proud New Mexican for my whole life. But one of the things we don't do well in New Mexico is make consistent laws that are consistent with each other. We don't do it in state statutory area. And what happens is most of our boards are citizen boards. And when you have citizen boards, even, you know, councils and commissions and the legislature, you have they do not have the time and the energy many times to make new sections of the code consistent with all the former sections. Of course, staff tries to help, and of course, lawyers try to help. But when there are some floor amendments that screw everything up, which happens all the time, then you're left with those. So it is a natural state of affairs. So the way you handle that is the same way that you handle uses that were not included in the code. And that is the planning director applies the statutory construction principles that exist in state law, and he can call me up and we will talk it through. For example, the law favors that you read that every section of an ordinance should have meaning. One section that is there, if it is you think that it's completely read out of the ordinance by another section, the law favors reading both to have meaning. If it's impossible, then you would follow the one that is the most specific rule. That's another rule of statutory construction. You follow the sections that is the most specific. And then once you do that, you go through the same process. The planning director makes his call on how to read this. You always see if you have former precedent of, has this been read a certain way previously? That is incredibly important in all of this. If you have a history of decision-making over the years, doing it a certain way, don't change in midstream. You need to develop a consistent interpretation of your code. And then it does fall to you to either accept or reject the planning staff's recommendation of how to read that. And then from there, then of course, the parties could appeal it up to the council, or the council might have the final decision on that, on a recommendation.
Thank you for that. Well, and since we're on the topic of variances, of late, staff is taking the position of presenting whether or not an applicant meets the variance criteria. And this is something we've always struggled with, but isn't that the role or the responsibility of the applicant to present that?
It's a great question. I feel that at the end of the day, that staff should guide applicants when they come in the door. Because if they simply act in a ministerial way and say, yes, I am the planner and you may make an application to me for a variance. Here's the paperwork, fill this out and I'll process it. If you do that, then what you'll get 9 times out of 10 is nothing but denied variances, because people don't understand it, and lay people struggle with these things because all this stuff is hard. I mean, all of you have had to learn it, and all of us have over time. And so therefore, I think that it's worthy for staff to work with the applicants to show them, they look at their property and help them. And then it is still up to the applicant to prove that they have it, though. And staff will present all of the evidence. It'll be in the record because, you've got the lot, you've got the map of the lot, and many times you can tell from the map or an aerial photograph whether it's appropriate or not. So it's hard for staff to not be involved. I think it's more natural if they present their position on the application to you, and then you can accept it or reject it if you think staff has made a mistake.
Again, thank you for that. Yeah, because it is a real struggle trying to get the applicants to do it. And I think it's been helpful for staff to actually step through the criteria and give their opinion on it. But that's our danger, is staff is also a party to these quasi-judicial cases. So
kind of, it's a very odd that they're, in a way, you guys are all the referee. The parties really are the applicant, and if there are any opponents in the public to that application, those are really the parties. We are the venue for that fight to take place in. Now, staff does, on some things, have to take sides, so therefore they look like a party, and they're sworn in their testimony, but they're different than an actual party in these situations.
I had thought New Mexico case law was pretty clear on that. And again, that's why staff is required to be sworn in. Is because
Well,
the
they're
parties
witnesses.
in a quasi judicial hearing must be sworn.
Well, and they're witnesses. Any witness has to be sworn. Clearly, they're witnesses. I'll give you an example of when the city becomes a party for sure, and that's if it's the city's application for a public building, for example. But staff isn't actually a party, but they are witnesses. That's why they're sworn.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, it's a subtlety, but it is good to think of them as, you know, the landowner, when they come in the door, the staff has no never mind one way or another on whether this person's application should be granted or not. They just facilitate them in the process, and then they look at the facts as they see them. So the first cut at looking at this, whether it's an appropriate variance or not, is from staff. As I said, that they don't have to do that, but for me, that's much better than leaving the applicant to just bump around in the dark.
Yeah, no, staff's in a tough position because their employer actually is their applicants. So it's interesting. So the other question I had in the chat was, and again, this is kind of my experience with different directors, different land use attorneys, regarding variances. We've gotten different direction as whether or not conditions of approval are generally legally allowed on a variance case.
Mm-hmm. And it is a difficult thing. Many years ago, there was a zoning hearing examiner in Albuquerque that in that case, the variances went through a zoning hearing examiner before they came to the full board, and so there was a full decision on it by the time it came to you. And in that situation, he was pretty lenient on variances and didn't really apply the letter of the law if the variance itself was so innocuous that it didn't seem to harm anyone. And so he kind of created his own criteria of being Solomon and splitting the baby, if you will. The problem arises, though, when the tough case comes up and then you have a history of not following your criteria. So I think and I'll get a better handle on this as we move forward with these cases, but to see what the criteria has been and if it's applied in a way that is defensible in a case where it becomes really important to the community that this not get granted because it is dangerous. And so I'll work with staff on that, but I can't say in a vacuum what I think of your folks' interpretation of variances yet.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just make a quick comment on that, is that our code does not have a real strong conditional use section. And so some of the variances in the past have been treated more as other communities would have treated a conditional use. You can do this provided you do these certain things. Like you can get the second mobile home on the lot if it's for a family member and you're taking it away in 2 years. The other thing is that our code historically had two versions of a variance. The one we still have now, and the definition relates to dimensional regulations. In other words, the site development requirements, setbacks, lot coverage, that kind of thing. Historically, we also had a use variance, which was much more along the lines of the special exception for those secondary mobile homes. And those tended to always have some kind of conditions because, again, that was related almost to like a conditional type use. That was written out of our code a while back.
All right, good discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Atillo. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I'll move ahead to Vice Chair Vigil. Do you have any questions for Mr. Audio?
I might, and it might make sense, it may not. Randy, basically what you're saying is if we don't divert from the ordinance, then we're good to go. If we don't try and make things up on the way. basically adhere to the ordinance in making a decision on the variance, and then we're good to go. And it can't come back on us. Can't come back on the city. Is there, or are there any rules, legal principles, or case law that will allow us to enhance the ordinance?
You know, and Richard hit on an important thing. Conditional uses are the exact opposite of variances. They are extremely fluid and subjective. And it's a good way to regulate uses that are not common or that need conditions. So I would say if you make your variance section more liberal or easy to meet the criteria, it's a real problem because most of the zoning criteria, like setbacks, they're there for a reason. And so if you allow them more easily, then you end up creating situations that are going to be problems for the neighborhood and the community. So I think the conditional use approach to give people a little bit more leverage in certain situations is preferable.
So conditional uses versus just adding to the ordinance any type of verbiage that'll require the applicant to I guess meet I guess this addition to this ordinance.
Well, I guess I think I misunderstood your question originally, so I apologize. I think the code is sufficient as it is, where it comes in as education of the public, starting at the planning department, and then when they get to the hearing, and why it's important. You know, we don't have the code there just for chuckles and grins. These provisions are there to protect the community and neighbors from neighbors. And so I think that is more educational than a code problem.
Okay, so in essence, we cannot just add stuff to the ordinance. The ordinance is of course it's a living document, but at the same time, there, would you say bylaws for the city?
Yeah, well, yes, they're your guiding principles. So if you don't have support for a position within the ordinance or the precedent of your past decisions, or like I said, you've got a new use being proposed, well, you're going to be out on thin ice on that one. So you just have to make the best decision you can. And then if it doesn't get appealed or challenged, then you have precedent for the next time that use comes up. So, I mean, it is a living document and it grows, but you want to always be tied to it and have support in it. So when you make those decisions, you're not going to let an oil refinery in a residential zone ever, you know? I mean, it's so in other words, you're going to naturally see those limits when you're looking at uses and where they properly fit.
So to add anything more to the ordinance, we would have to go through the proper channels to do that. We can't just say, well, you know, I know the ordinance says this, but we want you to also do this because we believe that it's the right thing to do.
You can do that if it's rationally related to a principle that has been adopted by the city in code. So if it's related to traffic conditions that have been proven in the case, and you place a restriction on where they put their driveway, as long as DOT approves of it, then you can do that. You know, so I mean, you can do anything that isn't specifically written down if it's supported by a part of an ordinance, the master plan, the comprehensive plan, any of those things that you can look to for support of why you want to do that.
Very well. Thank you very much, Randy. I appreciate that. Clears a lot, clears a lot of
Yes, sir.
confusion that I had. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Do we have any follow-up from anyone? If you do, just raise your hands. Or say something, Mr. Wright, Commissioner Wright, because I don't see your face. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Audio. I'll turn it over to staff to see if they have any closing remarks, but just one last thing I did want to say is on the discussion about staff being a party, and that I appreciate your input on that as well, because I'm also, I work for Los Alamos County, and so I'm in staff's position of being a technical expert to planning and zoning. And so in the cases there, the applicant is asked to address in the application the conditions of the code. And so, staff assists them in that because some of the language in there is a little not normal to the average person, but so they do assist in that regard. But staff also puts together their summary, including those from the technical experts within the county that address the different criteria in the code of whether or not the case meets or does not meet that certain criteria. So staff does address the criteria themselves, and so I think that's an important benefit to the commission, who a lot of times are not technical experts in the particular fields that are addressed by their criteria. So I'm glad to hear your response on that, because it's very consistent in how we approach it at the county.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think that it is, and everything's always a work in progress. We all learn every day. I've been practicing law for too long, but the idea is it's still a practice. Every day we learn, and every day we get better. And you all will make mistakes, staff will make mistakes, and I'll make mistakes. But as long as we learn from them and do things better in the future, that's all we can hope for.
All right, thank you. It's great having you here, and we truly appreciate it. Director Hubert, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I think you summarized really nicely the thing that I've been expressing to a lot of folks. It seems like a common refrain for the last few weeks is that our position is really to facilitate individuals in the community accomplishing what it is they want to accomplish. Sometimes they flat out can't, sometimes they absolutely can. Most of the rest of the time it's somewhere in the middle there. As you are all aware, we do a lot of stuff that doesn't come to this body. And so when we bring things to this body, again, helping to facilitate the desires of the community, and then the commission acting kind of as referees to oversee that process. So we're very thankful for Randy's assistance in clarifying a lot of points, not only the ones that I hope to touch on, but I'm glad it seems like we were able to touch on a lot of those that you guys have as well. So thank you all. And thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
All right, are we ready to move on to, did you have any other matters, Director, on that item?
We have nothing other at this point other than our big discussion. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Director. That was a good discussion. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for all your questions. Next item is item number 8, items for consideration, new business. And this is the discussion on 2021 priorities. So what I'd like to do on this one, let's see, it's about 7:08 right now. I'd really love to be able to conclude our meeting within half an hour. But Commissioner Quintana is laughing. But if we need to go until about 8 o'clock, let's try to wrap it up by then. We can always continue the discussion. But what I'd like to do on this item is go ahead and let Director Hubler start us off with it. give us his thoughts and his approach in how we can tackle such a daunting list of things. And then after that, I'd like to go around the room and ask commissioners to give us some input about what you all think are your priorities, your opinions on your priorities, and maybe try to focus it on your top 2 or 3, so that we can help focus the discussion. There's a lot of stuff on there. You know, we can compartmentalize them in ways where we can make it, you know, things that are going to be, you know, short-term goals versus something that might be more of a longer-term goal, just because it's going to require a lot more time and effort and possibly funding. So keep that in mind as you're working through this list of things and how you formulate your comments and recommendations to staff. So, Director Hubert, floor is yours.
So, all right, can everybody see the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got my microphone on now. So this list of topics originally derived from our work session almost exactly a year ago, February 27th of last year at La Cocina, where we basically came up with a whole bunch of things that we thought the city needed to address. Some of these are wish list type items. Some of them are to-do list kind of items. And obviously there's a number of things that play into, you know, when, how, and if they'll be accomplished. So I did share with the commission the minutes from that meeting. And then the list as we're looking at it now was basically that list just kind of reorganized. So thinking about kind of how we accomplish these things, obviously we've got some capacity related questions. Is this something we can handle with current staff? Is this something we need more new staff for? Something we can farm out to consultants? And then of course, funding questions related to whether this is something we get funded by the governing body, get funded by the state in some cases, or get funded directly through grants. Looking at the big list, I kind of see that there's 3 broad areas that a lot of these things fall into. Some of them are physical, things like stormwater, landscaping, sidewalks, complete streets, bike and pedestrian accessibility, trails, networks. Some of them are just straight up legal, rezoning, you know, creating development standards, updating our code. And some of them are a little bit more amorphous, more kind of social, cultural impact. Some of the ideas around, you know, establishing or maintaining a neighborhood fabric or a particular feel, you know, things like the mobile home standards, questions about, you know, ages. They've got other pieces to them. They're physical and legal as well, but really what they do is they change the feel of the kind of social, cultural aspects of the community. Things like economic development, historic preservation, parks, open space, Main Street, that sort of thing. So my recommendation for this evening, recognizing, of course, that staff has our own to-do list as well as our own sort of wish list. The governing body does as well. My recommendation for the body this evening is if we could, you know, somehow at the end of this process, I've identified 2 to 3 items that we'd like to see action on this year. And maybe if we can get as far as proposing what that action would look like, you know, some sort of a goal or accomplishment to know whether it happened. Or whether we're just working towards something, potentially identify resources, maybe even suggest an action plan if we have time for that. And then some of these items are very big, and it may be something that's super important, but absolutely not something that, you know, is going to happen or maybe even see action this or see something happen this year, but we want to start moving towards it. So maybe identify an item or 2 for a longer, you know, 5-year, maybe 10-year type plan. And then, of course, the final thing is that once we get this done, lobby the governing body with these ideas. Chair Martinez and I have already discussed the idea that he would present the outcome of this section of the meeting at a future city council meeting to kind of bring to their attention the things that we'd like to see action on, or this body would like to see action on, and then maybe you know, get it in their minds as they start working into the budgeting, which is going to be happening over the next couple months, mostly in April and May. That's my suggestion for this evening, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Director. So again, and what I like to do is kind of go around the room a couple times, let everybody have the opportunity to provide input, listen to everybody else's, and then have a kind of a second go around to follow up on anything that you may have heard, or in addition to what you may have already mentioned. So I'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Vigil, Vice Chair. Do you have anything on these subjects that you want to identify, talk about, comment on?
So, yes, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So are we looking at the recommendations, or are we looking at the projects and priorities of 2021? Can
So
you hear me?
we're looking at the list in the packet.
Okay,
It's called projects and priorities. So it's however you want to address, like Director Hubert said, if we can identify, 2 to 3 items that we want to focus on for action this year,
mhm.
that'd be great. And then
Yeah, there's a lot of items here. I'm sorry for interrupting, Mr. Chair. There's a lot of items here. Things that catch my eye right off the bat, Mr. Chair, Director, our affordable housing plan, under number 2, planning and land use planning efforts. Also, there was one other, infrastructure is a big one. Looking at the river, or the Fairview, or the New Mexico 68 corridor study, and possibly even a what can be attached to that is a relief route. I know that relief route, as you know, was proposed a long time ago, before I believe you were born, Director. I'm kidding, you were born, but you weren't here, and it was proposed, and it was going through native land, and there was some issues with that. I'm wondering if that can be revived, and just a thought. Those are the 2 main things that really caught my eye. Like I said, there's a lot here, a heck of a lot. And like you said, if we sit here and pick at it all night, we're gonna be here till tomorrow morning. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and we'll come back to you, Vice Chair, and see if you have any follow-up. So,
Okay, thank you.
all right. Commissioner Casalos.
I think, Mr. Chair, the biggest thing that I have is probably we should be looking at the New Mexico 68 corridor study. And basically, what I am concerned about is, I think the city should be outlining most of the drainages that impact the city. I think we're going to have some major issues. If we've been approving a lot of probably holding ponds like at Denny's, where they're full, and the highway has drainage, and I think the ones that we've been doing lately have more of an impact than the ones that don't have any, because they drain to the highway and they finally exit out to the river. Those are the biggest concerns that I have. But there's a lot of drainages that if we have an event, and I think we're going to be hurting. For now, those are my biggest concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner Casalos. And I'm actually kind of noting another one that's kind of related to that. It's on item number 3 on that list, further down the lower end of it, where it talks about watershed management, including drainage and stormwater standards. So that's another one that's kind of, an overall management plan versus just looking at one particular roadway. But you're right, they're all interconnected in some way.
They are, seems like, I don't know, if we don't, seems like we're not getting the funding, most of the big cities on the CIP list get the monies, the rural areas, I think, get left behind. But I think I echo kind of what Mr. Vigil said, probably in the bypass, because along Riverside Drive, it's getting really bad.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Casados. Commissioner Martinez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Vice Chair Clyde Vigil on the affordable housing plan. I think there's a big need for housing, not only within the city itself, but surrounding communities. I know Los Alamos is hiring many people and they need housing. So I think the number 2 planning and land use planning efforts, affordable housing plan, is one of mine. The second one, I agree with Commissioner or Vice Chair Clyde Vigil again in the capital improvements, infrastructure, transportation infrastructure. US 84-285, Fairview Lane, New Mexico 68, like Commissioner Casados just said. The need for a relief route, I think those are critical for the city to continue developing. With development wanting to come into our city, we need to have the infrastructure, and Riverside Drive is getting very congested. We need to try to figure out ways to minimize the congestion and have alternate routes if possible. The third one I want to put out there is the last bullet at the bottom of the page. I think we may want to see if we can talk about reestablishing a senior living facility in Espanola. I know that when the Hacienda de Salud shut down, that impacted a lot of people in northern New Mexico, not just in Espanola, but Espanola is the heart of northern New Mexico. Folks are having to take their elderly family to Santa Fe or Los Alamos, Albuquerque. So I think that might be something we can consider. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's some great comments. Thank you. All right, let me see. Commissioner Wright.
Okay, sorry, had to unmute. Where do I start? I mean, I appreciate this list, but I certainly see that it's heavy on brick and mortar type of approaches. And for instance, the infrastructure section is capital improvements, that's public works. The community service infrastructure is community services. These are really city functions that are more in the purview of the governing body than the planning commission. And I understand why planning staff is working on this. I mean, that's one of the issues I think that the city of Espanola struggles with is having a history of their planning directors wearing all sorts of hats and actually doing a great job with everything they have to juggle and it gets put on their plate. So I understand this. But to me, there's a glaring omission here, which is actually to work on the long-term vision and the goals that were given to us in an award-winning comprehensive plan. I mean, I see bits and pieces of it, but the whole purpose and intent of that plan, and was basically in the RFP for it, and the approach of those who put it together in the steering committee was to not to come up with a laundry list of, hey, these are all the things the city of Espanola should be working on, but was to actually give 5 actionable items that were doable in in a 5-year time frame. And it's interesting, we're looking at the same thing on the slide, is to identify 1 or 2 projects for a 5-year plan. It called for neighborhood revitalizations and a targeted approach to do that. It clearly called for a acequia protection, and what an asset that was to our community. This commission has before it a pending application which is yet to be heard. I'm extremely disappointed that didn't show up on the list as a priority for this year.
Well, we're here.
And that
asking for your
acequia,
input. We're here.
Mr.
asking for
Chair,
your input.
Mr. Chair, can I continue?
Why we're talking about this.
Mr. Chair, can I continue?
I'm telling you, Commissioner, that's why we're here getting your input. So, I mean, you could be critical, you can criticize all you want, but we're here to listen, to get your input. So tell us what that is.
And I'm giving you my input, Mr. Chair, as clearly and precisely as I can prior to your interruption. With regards to the acequia protection, I mean, that's one of the other components of the comp plan, was to plant as many trees and do whatever we could in this community. Trees, trees, and trees. All 3 of those items that I just mentioned go hand in hand. If the neighborhoods, if we can build that, the only way a comp plan is ever going to be successful is if it's embraced by the community and the community takes a hold of it. And we have an opportunity to actually involve huge segments of the community that have been basically neglected. And I think what we've seen in the COVID crisis with interruption of supply chains and everything else, I mean, sustainable local agriculture and food to table, which are our community is already doing. They're already putting food on the table of our school children. I guess that's what I'm missing in this is where is our long-term vision as a planning commission to work on these things. And it's like I say, we can't have much impact on infrastructure. That's not our purview. We're not the governing body. And I'll be honest with you, I'm really disappointed to see impact fees back in the discussion. This commission and the city council looked at that about 4 or 5 years ago, and the reality is they're never going to generate significant income with the growth that we have and the restrictions that you have on impact fees. So I would strongly recommend that the city not go down that road again. They've already been there with the previous governing body. And again, going back to the comprehensive plan, one of the discoveries in there was that this community is more than willing to do bonding for some of these infrastructure improvements and to address specifically, depending on the nature of the government obligation bonds, these issues of affordable housing, of capital improvements, and reestablishing senior services and doing some of the drainage studies and things that we need. So that's what I would really advocate for. And if we had a good go bond issue, I'd be out there beating the streets for that. Our city needs some investment in infrastructure. We've got problems all over the place. That was the issue we had kind of with Del Norte is great development coming in there, but their drainage plan is already just a money pit for the city. And accepting that street the way they did, which was, I don't know all the details, but not engineered too well and clearly not maintained when we had testimony on public record that the drain pipe is half full of sediment. So that's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I heard where you said that infrastructure shouldn't be on this list because it's not under our purview, but then you said that the comp plan talks about bonding, and then you thought that would be a mechanism that would be able to go after infrastructure and housing and stormwater. So to me, it is all interconnected. In order to have infrastructure, you have to have planning first. So that's why it's on this list, Commissioner Wright. Commissioner Quintana.
And with all due respect, Mr. Chair, that's engineer planning. It's long-range comprehensive planning and community development,
Well, guess what?
which
The
is,
city
that's
doesn't
why I
have a
referred to
long-range
the bricks
planner,
and
it has a
mortars
planning director.
abstract.
It has a planning office. So the city does not have a long-range planner, so we have Richard and
I
Allison.
understand that, but that's what we're here to discuss and advocate for,
That's right, and that's what I'm doing.
and to help them and not get in their way.
Nope, and we're here as a citizen committee to provide some input to our council about things that impact our community as a whole. I think if we leave things out just because they're not under our commission purview, we're doing a disservice. We have a lot of good input to share with council, even though it's not under our purview, but we do have some good input that we see because of the needs of the community, because of what we're seeing in cases that come before us. So thank you,
Well, and don't
Commissioner.
misinterpret me, Mr. Chair. I'm behind all of this. It's just realistically, I agree, we support and help with this, but we're a planning commission.
Yep. And
We're not the Public Works Department.
And we need to plant seeds for improvement. So we're not
Trees are
saying
good.
we have to do it. We're not saying but I think we have an opportunity to be able to provide some good input and to start a conversation. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Quintana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You indicated that you would like to try to wrap this up, but that you would be willing to go to 8 o'clock if necessary. So shall I interpret that I can have a whole half hour?
Well, I'd suggest you try to be
A little more
a
succinct.
little more quick than that, please.
Okay. First of all, I strongly endorse every bit of input that every commissioner has given. I think that this list covers a lot of things that are important. There are also very big hills to climb. I'd like to bring it down to a more base level. Infrastructure, housing, zoning, mobile home design, just to name a few, none of this will ever matter if we cannot draw a market into our community. Commissioner Martinez made the comment that Los Alamos is hiring a lot of people and there is not a housing stock up there. That is a very true statement. We also know is a true statement that the property values in Los Alamos are at least double of what they are down here. Now, at one point, one may argue that if we increase our property values down here, our tax base will go up. Oh, wouldn't that be terrible? We'd actually have more revenue that way. Right now, if Espanola were an attractive area in which to come to, you wouldn't think for one moment an investor wouldn't want to get more bang for their buck than what they can get in Los Alamos. I'm very pleased to see that you have hired a code enforcer. However, and you are looking at it as a priority of a building inspector. Last February, there were some ideas that were thrown around about that. Obviously, COVID put a kibosh to that at this time. We need to start picking ourselves up from our bootstraps. This also means get the community involved. Let's clean things up. When someone decides not to play by the rules, we as a commission many times have to hear that and try to govern someone in the right direction. A code enforcer does fall under the planning department, but yet I know of many properties that have violated the code over and over and over again. So just as the attorney said earlier, someone wants to place a garage on an odd-shaped property, they should be allowed to do it because all of the other neighbors do it. That rule should not apply to someone who doesn't play by the rules and in fact is a detriment to the surrounding property values. So comprehensive plans are extremely expensive, but they are also created by people that are looking at this without the long living eyes of here. Well, I've seen that for a long time. That's, people build on properties over and over and over because Johnny wants to move in next to mom and dad and those kind of things. And I'm not criticizing any of that. But when we've looked at comprehensive plans, they have come up with ideas. They have also gotten input from the community. And we all know what the community input has been. We also know what some of the authors of these comprehensive plans have proposed as good ideas. So I think that we should try to look at the overall picture and what we do. And I know it is a big task. I know that we don't just need clean and tidy properties. We also need favorable schools. We need safety. We need all of that. So it is huge. But there's been many a story over history of communities, of people, of everything that has been turned around. And it's a fabulous story. And I would love to see Espanola as that fabulous story. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Quintana. Appreciate the great words. So I guess for me, you hit on some good points, Commissioner Quintana, because I see that bigger picture of things too in a lot of these kind of what look like details, right? So, for instance, the overall look and livability of Espanola, the walkability, the drivability, the quality of housing stock in Espanola, the quality of transportation, the quality of community services, all have a place. They all have something to do with the overall quality of life and the overall development of the community. They're all pieces of that bigger puzzle. So that's what this is. It's kind of looking at those pieces, if you will, of how do we make the community, better in ways that are going to make Espanola one more marketable for businesses, more marketable for people to want to come and live here. Los Alamos has that down packed. I mean, good transportation systems, great parks, great recreation facilities. I know there's a funding discrepancy between Los Alamos and Espanola. I get it. But I think we need to start somewhere. And I think this is the whole intent of this is to try to get there. And, hats off to Richard and Allison for a lot of the work that they do, because they do cross lines a little bit with public works in trying to get things moved, because infrastructure it has a big planning component. If you plan it, you can get it funded. If you get it funded, you can get it built. So, and no matter what it is, a new recreation center, baseball fields, a senior center, senior housing, a lot of those things can follow. And so for me, yes, the list is a bit daunting, but it's trying to solicit input from this commission, because this commission sees things in very unique ways. Because one, we see the cases that come before us and the challenges that come with those cases. And then we have our own unique lens of how we look at things. So that's why I love what you just said, Commissioner Quintana, because that's a very unique lens. Um, and 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 you have a unique way of looking at things, as does Commissioner Wright, as do all the commissioners. We have all our strengths, and I think that's why this commission functions and does very well. And I think putting that behind us and saying to our council, hey, we are engaged and we want to be engaged and provide some ideas that can help move this community forward. Even if it's not within our wheelhouse, but we are members of the community too. So the comp plan is an excellent start to this whole conversation. And that's why these things are on this sheet of paper, is because of the comp plan, is because of the work session that we had a year ago. Look at the minutes. A lot of those things in those minutes are captured in here. That's why they're here. The comp plan is an overall goal, and that goal, that plan sets the stage for a lot of the details that branch out of it. So for me, I totally agree in kind of because Richard and Allison and his staff have to, run with this and be able to figure out a way to present this and implement things. And, so they're the doers, we're just the thinkers and the recommenders and, setting the overall goals. And that's what I wanted to do. And I'm glad Richard kind of focused things on if you can go back to that slide, Richard, that you had on the, 2 to 3 things that are kind of, within a year and there you go. So things that can be taken action on, within a year, and then look at things that are maybe more out into a 5-year plan set. And then the last is those that we should lobby the governing body about, because we care about our community, about what happens here, and what we see as things that can improve our community. So that said, sorry for taking so long there, but I think that I needed to kind of set the stage of what this is all about. And so for me, I think, we need to take bites at the apple and see how we can accomplish different things. Certainly things are more short-term and things are more long-term. For me, I think the short-term things would be doing the things within the code that we can address sooner than later. Looking at those bullet points under the phase 1 of the rezoning item on number 3. I haven't really had a big discussion with Richard on this one, but those to me seem achievable. Phase 2 will take a bit longer, so maybe that goes into the second item of things within the next 5 years. Kind of the other easy one for me that I've kind of been harping on for a while lately is invasive species in our community and code enforcement. So that's the getting rid of the bad trees so that we can bring in the good trees, so that's another one that seems that could be within a short-term item that can be addressed in our code, maybe sooner rather than later. Another maybe short-term thing for me is and to Commissioner Wright's point about utility and impact and utility connection fees, it's just a conversational point. But for me, the utility connection fees seem rather high here as compared to other places. Um, and for me, it wasn't necessarily looking to increase them, it was looking to decrease them. And so, that's an operational thing, but it could be a near-term thing, a short-term opportunity rather than a long-term. And again, it's not a planning department or a planning commission purview item, but it's a citizen of Espanola item. The other is utility infrastructure and easement dedication. So I have talked to Richard about this one a little bit, and the reason it's here is because there's certain areas of the city that I guess let me give you an example. So you call in 811 for a line spot because you're digging a hole to install a fence or plant a tree or whatever. So, all those go out to the various agencies that own utilities, HEMES, phone companies, and the city. So the city comes out or says, oh, we didn't have anything out there. Well, there's obviously a water line and a fire hydrant that runs to these homes, but they consider it a private line. And it's like, well, who are the owners and operators of that line? It's within a dedicated city easement. Those should be dedicated city utilities, so that's the reason that's there. Because there are instances where there needs to be some city operational conversations to be had about that. And to me, that could be a short-term thing, but there is some work that's involved. So to me, there's a lot of things that can probably fall within the 5-year plan. Maybe the stormwater and floodplain management items could be within that. That does need funding. It would be a good supplement to our code. I think, there are things moving along with affordable housing, and that's great. And I'm glad to hear other commissioners are behind that. And the other is the need for a senior living facility in our town, because Espanola serves a lot of people within Espanola and the surrounding area, and not having a senior living facility here, is a detriment. It's hard on families. So yes, it's not within our purview, but I think if we came together as a commission to put together some good thoughts and recommendations that we could lobby the governing body with, maybe those ideas can take flight. So I guess in a nutshell, those are the things that I just kind of wanted to touch on, not to get too lengthy, because I do think a lot of these things are worthy of being on the near term list, but just to be reasonable, knowing staff's workload and all the other things that they're involved with, I think we have a real opportunity to accomplish some of these things, and then, revisit this a year later, see what we accomplished, and then continue moving forward. And continue having a conversation with council to provide some to light the fire, to help with getting improvements to our community and moving things forward. So sorry for sounding like if I'm lecturing, but a lot of folks brought a lot of good topics up, and thanks for hearing me out. I want to go ahead and pass it along to Director Huber if he has any follow-up, and then I'll go back to the commission again for any final thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the one thing I heard from nearly everybody was housing, the affordable housing plan or just housing in general. And then also a lot of concern around drainage, watershed, that kind of thing. And then, of course, the comments about the senior living facility from a couple folks. I'm just looking through my notes here to see if there was anything I missed. As I indicated before, like everything on this list is obviously something that we as a city, if not necessarily this body as a commission or or us as a staff are engaged with. But, to Commissioner Wright's points, our department does wear a lot of hats. We are the transportation planners for the city. And so any kind of transportation planning, starts in our office and then, collaborates with the folks next door in Public Works. The city, as of today, I got notes from a director's meeting that I missed due to another meeting that as of today, the city has designated one of our existing staff members as a special projects coordinator, and we're going to be looking to hire a new project manager kind of position. So then that'll help particularly with some of these things moving forward. So that's kind of my takeaways from listening to everybody are housing, watershed, and senior living.
Thank you, Director. And I didn't bring up, some folks had a lot of, I think we had quite a few comments about the transportation projects that are currently in process. New Mexico 68, Fairview Lane, 84 285. I mean, those are actually in the works. Those are projects that you are engaged in currently, and that's a great thing, because now the planning is underway, and that provides a potential for improvements later. So I didn't mention them because I knew they were already in the works, but I am wholeheartedly in favor of all those transportation infrastructure improvements on our state roads.
Yeah, and most all the state road stuff is us providing input, and obviously the DOT actually doing nearly all the work. But yeah, they are undertaking a corridor study. We interacted with the project engineer for the McCurdy study, the South McCurdy study, which is just at the beginning phases. They're still scoping out the work, but the Fairview safety plan that was completed and we discussed has been submitted to the state for funding, and we're doing that again under the CMAQ and TAP funds later on. So yeah, and the Plaza intersection is moving forward. So there's a number of transportation projects, sadly not a relief route, but most everything else, the DOT is actively working on all of our other roads, and in fact, all of our other state roads at this point.
And I guess the biggest piece of advice I could give you is that to stay engaged, because if the city, the local government isn't engaged, they'll go away. The state won't continue. So we need to keep pressing them and stay engaged. So that's great. Thank you, Director. So I'll go around the room one more time. Let's go with Commissioner Martinez. Do you have any follow-up?
No, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And let's try to keep this follow-up to a couple minutes, if at all possible. Commissioner Casalos?
No, Mr. Chair, I think we kind of highlighted everything.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wright?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So yeah, my previous comments may have been taken a certain way. But bullet point 3 in the middle of that memo is absolutely awesome. That's all the things we need to work on. And I kind of beg to differ with you, Mr. Chair, that it's taking a bite out of the apple. It's a bite out of the elephant. There is a lot on that list. But I can tell you, I'm extremely disheartened and disappointed that acequia protection isn't on this list. It's a matter of public record that it's been reported as being done in calendar year 2021 to the Public Works Committee. I'm just, again, disheartened it's not on this list. That's disheartening.
It's under landscape standards, Commissioner. Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Vihil, do you have any follow-up?
Yeah, this list, like you say, it's daunting, or it can be. And what we've mentioned and about housing, that's going to take more time. I don't see why it hasn't at least come to some sort of even a hint of fruition as long as the city has been in existence. I'm not sure what a delay could be, if any, in any of this stuff. And I'm impressed with the work that staff has been doing, especially Planner Gillette. She's been awesome with the quality of her work, and the staff director. He's good at what he does. And if this list is going to be adhered to, I suggest you, mix it up. Go with something, couple of things that are easy, and one thing that is medium, and a couple of things that aren't going to be so easy. But yeah, priorities are priorities. And what do we want? What are we going to do to attract more businesses besides fast food restaurants? Not that they're not, welcome, but North Riverside Drive has become a trans fat row. And not only that, but I agree with Commissioner Wright. I mean, acequias should be a very definite priority. They've been around forever. They feed the land. The land feeds the people. And still, in this unique city, it still does it. And we can keep it unique, and we can meet these goals. But thank you for the hard work, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Appreciate the words. Let's see, Commissioner Quintana, I think you're the last one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Or comments. All right, well, I said my piece. Thanks, everybody, for the great discussion. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item. I guess before we do, I just want to ask staff how they would like to go from here.
So we're going to revisit, as I said, we had kind of our own to-do list from items on here and our own wish list. Some of them, there's a lot of overlap. So we'll bring this back as a topic at another meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Director. All right, we'll go to item number 9, matters from the commission. I'll go in reverse this time. Commissioner Quintana, do you have any items for the commission?
I don't believe so.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Vice Chair Vihil.
Just want to reiterate the good job you guys are doing, staff. Mr. Chair, your input and your help with staff, with the director, is very, very evident. Your influence is very professional, I can tell, and it's coming out and it's showing. And I hope you stay on for a very long time as chair, for 10 years, 20. But as far as everybody doing their job on the commission, you guys are amazing also. And it's sometimes it's just tough to be here, and other times it's a joy But, got to roll with the punches. Everybody do a good job. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for the great words and the encouragement, but I'm not sure about that. Let's see, Commissioner Wright.
Not much, Mr. Chair. Again, repeat the kudos. I realize it doesn't take much to look around the town during the COVID stuff and all the work that Richard and Allison have done, and how much work there's on the plate, and how little time they have to do this elephant eating that we're talking about. Just please understand my comments come intended to be constructed, and I hope they're taken that way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Casalos.
I think I've said my piece. I don't have anything else. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Martinez.
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I don't have anything other than just to say thank you to everybody for your work tonight and for the discussion. I really appreciate it. So we'll move on from here. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Hi.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, folks. We'll see you next time.
Same time, same channel.
More or less.
All right, cool. Good night, guys.
Right.
Thank you.